Financial Matters.
Magwegwe is here with me, Head of Financial Wellness and Advisory at Nedbank. He's also a GIBS faculty member. He will be a professor. He will be a professor.
Thank you.
I know, Doc, I know that there are people that don't like me saying that.
I know, yes.
I know that. I know that there are people that don't like me saying that because it makes it sound like it's an official announcement. It makes it sound like, it gives it maybe the kind of gravitas it shouldn't give it.
Yes.
Because of the seriousness of the stuff that we discuss. It is my wish.
Yeah.
It is my wish and it is my belief that you will become a professor. So let me put it out there that whenever I say that, it's really because of the contribution that Dr. Frank Magwegwe makes on this conversation. And of course, the fact that he is contributing to various peer academic documents that you write about. And that's how people become professors. You are a teacher and you are in that space. So, for me, it's fait accompli. But of course, for those that don't like it, I'm sorry. It's just an expression.
I actually met someone, Bro Obs.
Yeah.
And he said, Bro Obs and Chris, they really want you to be promoted there. These GIBS are aware of that.
No. GIBS must get aware if they are not. And if they need to talk to us, let them come here. We'll talk to them.
And I told them the process. And thanks, Bro
It's
Obs.
a process.
And what a beautiful way, Bro Obs, to start the show with you really getting us to think at the big picture, the macro.
Yeah.
To just say, here's and good evening to our wonderful 710 Cape Talk listeners, that have you ever sat back and said, you know what, some of the decisions that the government makes, and in fact, most of them, like in the household, have financial impact. What is the pecking order of those? What principle, what values, how do you break deadlocks? How do you choose, as we will unpack our budget today, the compromises, their choice that have had to be made, such as from 2%, we at 0.5% this year, and they propose 0.5 next year, that even the minister himself says, look, we'll review it next year. We've penciled it in, but depending on how things shape up, we'll also, look at it. So it's for me, it really starts us with that point where we know almost every decision we make in one way or the other, here's a link to our finances. So I enjoyed how you just set up the show to say, do we sit back and think about that in the household?
Yeah.
And say, oh, stop this, but do this, but more of this and less of that.
Absolutely. And the reason why I chose that way of having this conversation, because I found it very effective the other time. Yeah. The other time we had this conversation where people got to understand that, so this is how, even Slay Queens came into the conversation.
Remember.
And Ben 10s came into the conversation.
Yes,
And so it for me, it demystifies the whole idea of the budget speech. It gives us a sense of analogy as to who the personalities are, the various players and political parties, of course, that are going to negotiate around whether or not this budget is going to be accepted and adopted. And so it's very, very important for me that we demystify and we make relatable the conversation around the issue of the budget. And so I want to start. The budget. Why? Why do we have a budget? Why do we have the minister having to tell us what he told us today?
Like we said last time, this is one of those moments in the calendar of the government, right? Where they take us in their confidence, the way I see it, and say to us, we have various sources of revenue where we get money. Primarily, as we'll unpack, perhaps, it comes from various types of tax, corporate taxes, value-added tax, custom and excise duties, all those things, right? That's the step one. So the government is saying to us, and I love the way of thinking about that, taking us in confidence to say, guys, over the next year, this is what we expect to get, right? This is what we expect to collect. That's just step one. And part of it, why governments across the world, perhaps, do this, it's because one of the biggest lines for almost all countries is this idea of personal income tax. Let's give it a different name, but it's individual paying tax.
Yeah.
We want to know what are they doing with the money.
Yes.
We want to see the value because it's got so many other positive things like tax morality and. I mean, you've seen now people just saying, oh, but we pay, but potholes, but the water, but you can get into an issue where people just feel you taking and they're not using it wisely. So there's that element to say we collect this money from you, and so we want to share with you what we have on our spending agenda. That's one part of it.
Yeah.
The other part of it, Bra Obs, is a detailed breakdown, as usual, of where will the money go. Because like in any household, you see when we unpack the budget,
yes,
where you put the money is very important, right? Because some areas where you put the money, you are setting up a foundation of new businesses to come into South Africa, of factories, of stable water, of stable electricity supply. That means more jobs are created, more people pay tax, and the economy grows. Other parts where you spend the money, you have to, like we're talking about, the various type of social grants that we have, they might not necessarily have a direct correlation in terms of growth in the economy. So they have to strike that balance. Part of it is the minister telling us they've really thought about it, and this is how they are going on about it. And I think what has been interesting this time around, given the performance of the ANC in the last elections, is that we haven't really had fireworks like this around the budget. Because when you have a majority, you decide on your budget, you come, you've got the numbers on your side in parliament, you present the budget, and off you go. So for the first time now, given we have this government of national unity, we beginning to see another side of our democracy. That budgets across the world, even in France, it happened a few years ago. It can be tough to get it approved.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the majority, and other parties won't just support it for it to be adopted, and in terms of just the rules of how a government works.
I'm understanding you to be saying that the announcement that we got today from the Minister of Finance was basically a wish list.
Yes.
A wish list that says, listen, this is what we think we're going to collect in terms of revenue through SARS.
Yeah.
These are the expenses that we have that are current expenses.
Yeah.
But these are the priorities that we have as a country in order to bring about the kind of stimulation to the economy so that more investors can come in and maybe create jobs. In fact, I heard somebody very angry today speaking to John saying, listen, no mention at all about jobs and how they're going to be created.
Like a credible plan. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that in itself was a big issue for that particular analyst. But generally speaking, it would mean that this is what we believe we're going to get.
Yes.
This is what we have to pay in any case.
Yes.
You got to pay for your groceries and your boarding, right?
Yeah.
You got to pay for your rent.
Yes. Transport to work.
Those are non-negotiable.
Yes.
These are the things we have to pay for.
Yeah.
But these are the things that are variations, perhaps, with the view to bringing about some sort of stimulation to the economy, to paying down our debt, to redressing some issues that have to do with a transformation. Whatever the story is, that's what the budget was about.
Yes.
Okay.
And so your analyst that you listen to at John Shaw is saying, given the picture that has been painted, the challenges the country is facing, I don't think enough emphasis was done around jobs as an example, right? If we bring that to the household, before I share a couple of numbers, Bra Obs, I think it's so important for us to kind of really appreciate first what you are saying, that it's kind of a wish list, that this is what we think we'll collect and this is what we'll do. And then, like in any household, as the year progresses, there might be surprises here and there and you need to adjust. And therefore, I want our listeners to understand at the core that a budget is about choices. Choices that a lot of people have really spent time thinking about, supported by work that the National Treasury does. And they're saying, we think for where we are in the country at the moment with the challenges that we are facing, these choices are the right choices for us, right? And so you can make any choices, right? Like we saw, they were trying the 2%, didn't quite work, we're at 8.5. And the reason I want to start there before we share some of the big numbers that are in our budget is that we want our listeners to see that whilst their budget is smaller, it's not this 2.56 trillion that we're talking about when we talk about the SA budget, but it's the same principle. You've got fixed income in your household coming. Either it's just you and spouse, you spouse and side hustles, doesn't matter, right? You have to make choices on that.
Yeah.
So it's important for us to understand the contestation and what the government must do with these monies that they collect.
Yeah.
It's the same as in a household. Do we take kids to this type of school?
Yeah.
Do we buy this type of car?
Yeah.
Do we holiday this way? Do we dress this way? Do you use prepaid electricity or not? Should we make a plan for solar? Or actually, we think load shedding is gone. There seem to be now a new problem of water. What should we do? Those are all choices, right? And that is the same. And for me, I think it has been wonderful, just given that the budget the budget speech was postponed. I think it has allowed, you can see conversations for people to kind of really see
the conversation
at the household level.
Yeah,
it's quite similar.
So give us a call, 011-883-0702. The parallels that you draw from what we heard today in the budget speech by the Minister of Finance to your family. Yeah. Have there been times when the family is not in absolute agreement about the priorities and therefore the spending strategy that is going to be adopted for a particular period? Has there been a time when mom believes that, we need to get some new couches because we've repaired these ones 1,000,000 times?
Yeah.
They're starting to really have some proper wear and tear tattletales right there. Dad feels, no, we need to get a new family car. Yeah. But there's this creak on the wall, this crack that's appearing all the time that we've been ignoring. Yeah. And if we don't fix it, we won't have a place to live because the thing is going to fall apart. And what is the basis upon which do we decide to finance first? And I think that's where we are at the moment. Yes. And we have a good idea that this year we're going to get so much money into the family's fiscus, really, into the family's purse. And we know in this instance, of 2.4 trillion rand is coming our way.
That's what budgeted, 2.4 trillion rand.
For this family, South Africa Incorporated.
Yes.
Now, what was the story about the 60 billion rands shortfall, Dr. Frank? Talk to me about that. What did that mean?
So that is saying, if we look at what we plan to do, right? So let me give you a sense, perhaps.
Yeah.
So that's the budget that we are talking about. And so when we talk about the shortfall, the government says, of this money, we are making a certain number of choices. The first one is we think it's very important for us to stimulate growth, to do things that grow the economy. We will put 290 billion towards economic development. So if you think of something like work to get us off the grey list, for example, right? That costs money, that process. That's what we are talking about, right? Making sure we have constant supply or reliable supply of electricity. Sorting out some of the problems we are seeing in our municipality. Perhaps things like the railway network.
Yeah.
It's a problem if it's not working
huge,
well.
absolutely.
Because we've got all the coal in Western Cape, in Mpumalanga. It has to get to the ports, right? Particularly at Durban. And
Richards Bay, yeah.
And Richards Bay. If that is not working, it means we are using roads. But we're creating congestion on the roads.
Yeah.
We are putting more volume on the road that was never meant for those. So there's more wear and tear on the road. So everything has consequences, right? So the government says, like in a household, perhaps, we are prioritizing things that will grow the economy. 290 billion. That's what we're going to spend there. That's a choice. Do you see that? Right? We'll get your question of shortfall just now. Just to give a sense, what is the government thinking in terms of spending this money? They will correct their revenue. They will collect.
How much did you say it was? How much trillion?
So round it up, 2.5 trillion. We'll tell you where they're going to get it, the different type of taxes, right? Then they say 290 billion, we're going to put it on economic development. Then they say peace and security, which is police services, defense, home affairs. We will give them 266 billion, right? Those are well thought through numbers, Ops. They don't just come from nowhere. And then general public and services, here we are talking about public administration, external affairs, legislative organs. We give you 80 billion, rounding it up. Then you've got a number, Ops. I need to practice. I need to hold on to my chair so that I don't fall. Then there's a number, 425 billion to service the debt that the government has. Now, let's go back. It's more than economic development. It's more than peace and security. 425 billion rand debt service costs. This is why I had to hold to my chair. This is how big that is. We came from 10 years ago.
I'm worried because not too long ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa said to us that we were going to spend 900 and I don't know how much billion rands in infrastructure development, I think. But I suppose that's over a 3-year term.
Yes,
right?
correct.
Okay. But in order for us to be okay with our creditors, we've got to be spending 400 and something billion rands a year.
Yeah, to pay what we borrowed, right? In interest, debt servicing cost. That's why we bring it back to choices, Obs. Some analysts were quite vocal, and what did they say? Aibo, just go and get more money. You can't be increasing that. Yeah. That's what some people were saying, right? Yeah. But then the choice is, okay, if I get more money, I need to pay more interest on it, right? There is a choice. Or I increase VAT. What are you doing when you're trying to increase VAT? You're saying, I don't want to increase my borrowing costs. Let me try to find the money from somewhere else. Real situation, very relatable to South Africa. Because 7 in 10 South Africans, as we speak, Praobs, they are saying my debt is a little bit too much.
Yes.
They are saying when I look at what comes in, the money that goes to pay credit card, home loan, car loan, clothing accounts, it's a lot.
It's more than the money I pay for school fees for all 3 of my children.
Yes, then I'm left with little.
Yeah.
That reality, it's in households in South Africa. That is why the whole idea of even increasing VAT, you can see how people are pushing back. Because like the country that is constrained, families have been constrained since COVID. So you can see, you then have to make choices, right? Oh, but no, I can't do this. Then I'll have to do this. If I don't fund, so let's come back to the 60 billion. So, Minister Godongwana was saying, guys, if I don't increase VAT by 2%, I have a shortfall. Where am I going to get the money to do NHI preparation, as an example, to fix roads, infrastructure, Helen Joseph, all the stuff that we hear. So I have a shortfall. In other words, the things I've projected to do, peace, security, economic development, and what's going to come in, they have a mismatch. Something has to give, right? I have to find the money somewhere. And what did they do in the end? Well, 0.5% VAT had consequences for us because there's now the shortfall. And what has happened to us? Well, brackets for our income tax that are almost always adjusted for inflation, they haven't been adjusted. Number one, consequence.
So if you get an increase
at your employer,
you immediately are bumped into a new tax bracket.
You can fall into a new tax bracket or you can pay more tax.
Meaning you're going to pay tax.
Yes.
More taxes.
More tax, yet your current buying power, right? SARS hasn't adjusted it by adjusting your brackets, right? Interest, where you have for different, all the way to seniors, we've got rebates for interest.
Yes.
In other words, how much interest that the South African government allow you to earn before they want to collect tax on that interest.
Yes.
They've kept that constant, right? Your sin taxes have gone up. So this budget is here to have compromise of how do we cover the shortfall by not increasing VAT that much, but the money has to come from somewhere like in any other household. And you can see, perhaps, the consequence, right, for the consumer. And then to try to fix it for us, what else did they do? They then increase the basket for items that are VAT-free.
Yes.
So offal, chicken feet, certain tinned foods, they have been increased they have been included rather in the basket so that we don't pay taxes. What did that cost to the economy? 2 billion rand. By including a new whole category.
So what you're saying to me is that there have been traditionally certain items that you buy that are zero rated as far as
poo, correct,
and these are usually the staples.
Staples, that's typical what you call
that
them.
People enjoy on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And those things are zero rated as far as taxation is concerned.
Tax is concerned, yeah.
Particularly particularly value added tax.
Yes.
But are there instances down the value chain, up the value chain, where we might find taxation for those things?
Yes, so not taxation in the value add, but what people often miss, perhaps, is that we're just not adding value added tax to that basket of goods, but it doesn't stop their prices increasing
Precisely.
as the ups and downs of the economy happen.
Gotcha.
Like where that issue, Ukraine, when it started a few years ago, 3 years or so ago, we could see eggs, for example, right, going up quite dramatically.
So that basket isn't insulated from inflationary issues.
Yes, we're just being protected. Say it's got
From
inflationary issues. It would be very tough for consumers to handle inflationary issues and VAT on spot on.
Yes. So if there's a war in Ukraine, I mean, wherever, then we'll still be affected by those issues.
Absolutely. Global shortages of stuff.
But what they'll do is that they just won't make us pay value added tax
on that basket, which has been made bigger now. And so it really highlights the give and take. And I hope our consumers can see in their household, those are the choices. Okay, you don't want 2%. Fine. We'll try 0.5. But I've got a shortage now. I'm not gonna adjust your brackets because I'm in trouble now. But because I've put VAT by 0.5%, I know the basket for people in the lower to middle income, yes, they're gonna be in trouble. Let me put more goods into this basket that are exempt from VAT to try to balance the numbers, because the government has so many things it wants to do and the money is limited, just like in any household.
So so now this wish list has been broadcast over.
It needs to be approved now.
Now it has to go through
parliamentary process,
through pillow talk.
Yes. In households, correct.
It has to go through pillow talk.
Yes.
Mom and dad are going to now argue as to whether or not they're actually going to go according to the wish list that was presented.
Yeah.
Mom has got certain misgivings. Yeah. Dad has got certain misgivings. He wants certain things to happen, and he believes that as the head of the household, he needs to be respected in terms of what he has.
This is my choice.
Mom is saying, yeah, I respect you and everything, but the
gutters need to be fixed.
But the gutters need to be fixed.
Rain is coming.
And this idea that you want to buy a new BMW, I'm sorry, you can't have that.
Yes.
Dad's saying, no, I'm buying the BMW because I've got to look the part so that I can be able to get a better job so that we can. Mom is saying, listen, you bought a BMW the other time.
3 years ago.
3 years ago, and you still don't look the part.
Yes.
And you need to go to the gym.
Yeah.
and dad is saying, yeah, but you're looking for new curtains.
Yes.
And you looking for new curtains that you're going to invite the pastor to come to the house, so he's going to charge you more tithing.
Because you're doing well.
Because you're doing well. So we're going to have that kind of conversation.
Absolutely.
And it's going to happen in the bedroom.
Yes.
In Parliament.
For us, yes. We already had DA, EFF saying, guys, we're not sure about this.
Yeah.
So we're not going to go with this. It's not growth enough. We said no VAT. And so now there's going to be, how will this be adopted by the majority, by the number required in Parliament? Because ANC doesn't have the number.
Yes.
So they are now needing to reach out, I guess, to other parties if the DA and EFF say no, as an example.
Yes.
And if you bring it to the House, that's the idea. And it's often in households like where parents disagree, and then you go via the kids, for example, or via a sister to say, but I want this, can you tell me that? And so you can see when resources are limited, right, choices of what you eventually do, it's absolutely critical. And I love the way you are saying, Bra Obs, wish list. Because South Africans, we often then say, my goodness, how many municipalities have we had, Bra Obs? We have failed to spend 600 million. It has gone back to Treasury, for example. It's a wish list because some areas, you can't just spend, there need to be capacity so that you get value for that money. So some things that are budgeted will not happen exactly because of other challenges. Or we might have to shift, like what you are seeing with the Defense Force, for example. And that's exactly what happens in the house. And often what happens, we don't tax anyone in the house. So to make more money, we then look for side hustles, perhaps, to try to bring that additional money.
011-883-0702. What did you hear? Yeah? And how do you make sense of it?
And how do you feel?
Yeah, that's
about
also
the
a very
impact
good
on your
conversation.
personal finances.
Oh my. Give me a call, 011-883-0702, 021-446-0567. I'll read you some of the messages that have come through. Debusipanya says, evening Aubrey, maybe I misunderstood. I was under the impression that you once announced that Dr. Magwegwe is now a professor. No, you would have gotten that wrong. Debu never announced that. We said that he will become a professor. Trust me, when he does become a professor, I will announce it, and I will announce it very loudly. Says, I thought that the title had been officially awarded. No, it has not. On a more serious note, though, he says, I noticed that Mani disrupted the presentation of the budget speech at the onset, almost taking the role of the EFF by disrupting the proceedings, beginning saying that the Minister of Finance owes Parliament an apology for not presenting the speech last month. In response, the minister just said that he indeed owed Parliament and the nation an apology. Yeah. He never actually apologized, which I found funny that MKP accepted his response. It seemed like just a silly and unnecessary disruption because nothing came of it. Says, there we are. Yeah. Those are the theatrics.
We expect because they have a stance.
Yeah, this is just the normal sort of theatrics that you'd probably expect from politicians in that space. Everybody's trying to catch some camera time. But I suppose to the question that they was asking at another level for me is we need to get some sort of consensus. Yes. We need to get a majority of people in the Parliament agreeing that this must be adopted.
Because that's what the Constitution says.
And people have expressed the fact that they are not entirely in agreement.
Correct. Yes.
Which is a shift from no, we don't agree at all. People are saying, let's start to chat. Yeah. And I imagine that other things will become part of the negotiation process. So when the ANC government goes and speaks to the DA may say, listen, I want you to put on the discussion agenda the issue of the expropriation bill, which I'm a little bit uncomfortable with.
Very much so. Or also the DA, something that they have hinted. Yep. They have been saying for a while, and you saw Madam Helen Zille continuing to say one of the things that really worry is the bloated cabinet. Yeah. And the associated expenses of maintaining such a big cabinet. Yep. Whether you are thinking of secretaries, assistants, deputy ministers,
all the perks
cars and all the perks, right? So you could start kind of seeing that, give and take around someone wanting to prioritize their demand in return for you, supporting this.
And budget. I suppose if they're going to go and speak to the EFF, they'll have other issues that they want to raise in order to get their way. Yes. And I imagine that they'll have certain political issues that they want to bring to the fore that they'd want government to support them.
Prioritize, yes.
And the same with the MK party. So it appears to me that it's a matter of mom and dad now arguing and talking to each other. And if they don't agree, then they're going to start going to the children to go and speak about what it is that they can approve the budget. Yeah. What does the approval of the budget look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's interesting because I've been listening quite a lot to political analysts today. And the consensus seems to be, they thought long and hard about it, the NC, in terms of, guys, it cannot be zero, VAT. So we'll have to go with something. And, they've went to this 0.5. Perhaps they've got something a little in the back end, that they will use to get this process. It's not like they they did not know the stance of the AFM. It was all publicized. They knew the stance of the DA. So they're saying there's probably, some carrot that they have as they enter into whoever they're going to find the support from. Because ultimately you need to say, this program of spending, that's what you mean by approval, has been adopted by, Parliament, and therefore off we go. The process starts. And it's an important process, because if you look at the Office of the Auditor General, for example, right, then their work is based on, this is the budget that you got, right? And then we start looking into the analysis they do, and they look at how you spend it. Was it in line? Was there wasteful expenditure, etc.? So it's quite key in the functioning of the program of government to say the Defense Force needs to do something. They need to move forces in or out of the DRC. They need money. So you can't spend money as any organ of state if the budget hasn't been approved to allow you, to give you for National Treasury effectively to say, here's the money, spend it, I'm putting it in your bank account. That won't happen if a budget is not approved.
So basically what you're saying to me is that what has been proposed this afternoon by the minister is not yet the budget.
Yes.
It has to go through a process that's the horse trading,
the political process.
The political process that's going to take place.
Yes.
And then only when there is some sort of agreement, some sort of consensus, then it unlocks the money from the fiscus.
National Treasury.
And then National Treasury then gives money to all of the different
ministries,
levels of government or tiers of government. Okay, now.
Correct. And I wanted to say, Brock, before you go, there's a threat now. They're saying by end of the month there might be a shutdown. In the US, for example, it's similar to that, where the rules that govern disbursement of money, and when there's disagreement on that, you stuck.
Yes.
Because you cannot be giving anyone money. What authority do you have if the budget hasn't been approved?
Yes.
It's not Treasury can't yet. So it's quite an important part.
Yes.
And I think it's helping, us people on the street to kind of appreciate the democracy and the process that actually how government works.
Which brings me to the first set of comments I made just as we started to say that every family has got to have a certain set of principles, a certain set of priorities, a certain direction that they are facing in order for them to be able to move in unison. Right?
Yes.
And I imagine that that's really the challenge that we have at the moment.
Without a doubt, Probs.
A challenge that says that these are the shared principles and priorities that we have. And this is going to be a great test to check whether or not we share those principles and we share those priorities. Maybe not in the same degree, but do we share them? And that is going to be demonstrated by who supports this budget.
Yes.
And who doesn't, and whether or not it'll be adopted.
Yes. And you know why that is so critical, Bra Ops? I really love the way you're unpacking it, because what's important around principles, what do you use when there's a deadlock, right? I just want to use one that fortunately, I think I can use those words to say sense prevailed. So if you look at the World Bank and IMF, those important, institutions, Bretton Woods institutions, they often call them, right, that are there, I guess, to kind of, make the global financial system work well. Countries have agreed, you get input from them, and one of the principles that they put forward that our Commissioner of SARS, Commissioner Edward Kisweta, was saying was, guys, when you increase taxes, it doesn't follow that you'll be able to collect.
Yes.
In fact, there is robust evidence that you need to balance increasing taxes with increasing the capability of an agent that collects the tax, such as SARS in our example, to be able to do the money. So there was a principle that was at stake, because commissioners say, give me 4 billion. We're losing so money to illicit gold mining, to illicit tobacco. There is just so much money, or to not being able to.
We're talking about 800 billion rands.
It's huge. The numbers people talk about, if you look at organizations like Outer, they were talking about easy. You can get 500 billion if you do 1, 2, 3, because there's a lot of leakage in the system. In fact, they came up with their proposal that you don't need to increase VAT. Here's 500 billion, how you can get it, right? So there is the example of principles, perhaps, where in the end there was an agreement that actually it's a good idea. Let's give SARS 4 billion or about 4 billion to enhance their ability to collect tax.
Was that part of the proposal?
It went through, yes.
That please give SARS the 4 billion rand so that they can go and fetch the 800
They can
billion.
collect more, yes,
Okay,
yeah.
so
they got their allocation, as an example.
But it's still a proposal at this stage,
Yes, yeah,
until
so
such time as it
correct,
is accepted.
Yes.
So I'm really hoping that we can take those calls on 011 883 0702. What are your thoughts? Let me read you some of the messages that have come through. As we talk about the budget delivered or the budget proposal, I think that's what we need to call it.
That's what you have been saying, bro. It's a budget proposal.
It's a budget proposal by the Minister of Finance. It's not the budget, as we've seen in the last 6 administrations. Because in the last 6 administrations, the African National Congress had the numbers. There was not going to be any issues as to whether or not it would be adopted.
Yes.
For the first time in the new dispensation, we have the reality where the budget has to go through a political process in the bedroom. Sorry, in Parliament. Let's read some of these messages. Government wants to implement NHI, but we can simply decrease the cost of medical services by 15% by cutting VAT on a medical service. It's an essential service. So this person says that medical services should be 0 rated. There's another proposal. I know that the Build One South Africa of my money also said that here's a 75 billion rands that you can find very quickly. So everybody has got a lot of ideas, right? But I imagine that whatever idea is tabled means that another idea suffers in terms of its ability to provide us with whatever revenue it thought it would give us.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. And I think this is a good point to give our listeners an idea, right? Of the household has people who work and they earn income from their employers if they are formally employed or self-employed, or they've got side hustles. Those are the sources, right, of income. If we look at South African Inc., right, what did we learn from this budget? Guys, 811 billion for the 2025-26 financial year. Let me say the number again. 811 billion comes from personal income tax. That's our highest line.
Yes.
Followed by 500 billion. Value added tax.
Right.
Right? See those 2 lines, right? Yes. Then you get by a third, corporate income tax.
Yes.
Companies, 331 billion. Then you go 155 billion custom and exercise duties. Then you go fuel levy, 90 billion. Then you go other. So essentially, if you say the top 3, personal income, an important line, like for many countries, value added tax or sales tax, as some other countries call it, and then corporate income tax. And you're right, Obsa, the mix of those, depending on how you choose to spend money, shifts. If you focus more on economic development, and we have startups, we have small business coming, they employ people, right? What happens? You've got a different picture in terms of as companies grow, your line for corporate tax also grows, as well as, I guess, at the personal level. So that mix is a function of choices you're making today. The argument around NHI, around medical expenses, there's a number of organizations that have kind of made that proposal that make those VAT exempt, but it's put a big hole in VAT.
Yeah. Let's take some calls. Mariah is in Rivonia. Good evening to you, Mariah.
Good evening to you, Aubrey, and lovely, as always, to talk to you. I know you don't have a lot of time with your guests, so I'll be as quick as I can. I've got sort of 2 issues. The one is, do citizens have a say in the matter at all? Because I know there's been comments and so forth prior to the budget speech about government itself cutting down on perks and things like that. And that may be something that citizens, certainly I'd be one of those to demand that. But they're not going to vote against themselves in that regard. They're going to say, we'll do it without houses. But I mean, and has anyone done a calculation, even if rough, of if they were to scrap all of these perks down to the bare minimum, how much would they get into the coffers? Just a question. Thank
Lovely.
you.
Lovely question.
Great question. Before you answer that question, Dr. Frank, Clive says, no, SARS gets 7.5 billion, not 4 billion to capacitate them to collect more tax, Braobs. So maybe you want to answer Mariah's question, but just keep that in mind.
Happy.
Clive saying that it's actually
it's
7.5 billion instead of 4 billion.
Okay, cool.
For SARS. But go ahead, Dr. Frank. Or let me take one more call before we answer Mariah's question. Ohotle is in Centurion. Hi, Ohotle.
Hi, Aubrey.
Yeah, go ahead, Mama.
A comment. You know, I think the government is a typical example of a government that doesn't care about its people. They create the problems and they want to come up with solutions.
Yeah.
In South Africa, we have a mindset of literally making able-bodied individuals dependent on grants that is just taken from the government.
Yeah.
Right now, we've got over 1,000 unemployed doctors, and yet we are giving visas to foreign nationals, and we call them. We say that they've got special skills to come and become GPs in South Africa. We really are literally becoming a typical African nation, and we need to have an honest conversation. Do we really literally want to be another African nation that goes to the Europeans and beg, for funding and not translate it to what we can do for our African, for our own people?
Yes. Yeah.
South Africa does not have.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick one.
Yes.
South Africa does not have an unemployment issue. The reality is that we've got an immigration issue.
Okay.
Once we get rid of that, and we hear people coming online and say, "Yeah, South Africans don't want to do those jobs." South Africans don't want to do those jobs. Is it because you don't want to do those jobs? So let's be honest.
Yeah.
Let's look after our own before we start looking after our neighbors. We love them. I want to take care of my sister's kids. I want to take care of my cousin's kids. But I cannot prioritize my cousin's kids over my own children, guys.
Yeah.
Let us be honest. Those children have fathers.
Let me run.
Let's hold those parents accountable.
Sure. No, absolutely.
For their own children.
Yeah.
This time we're talking about countries. Let's hold Zimbabweans, Mnangagwa, responsible. Mnangagwa is coming online and he's laughing. I did not send you there. Guys.
Ohotle, let me stop you there because we've run out of time. Ohotle in Centurion, and I suppose it speaks to
those are the choices,
the issues that we were talking about what are the priorities, what are the principles, what is the direction the country is going, and that's the contestation that is going to take place in Parliament as different parties start to say, no, you've got to prioritize the issue of immigration, you've got to prioritize the issue of health, you've got to prioritize Nduna. I'm pushing because I want you to have the last.
Quick for that, but go for that one
but
first.
Nduna ask if this is a proposed budget. How is it that in the past, government was able to affect sin taxes increases immediately? And I think we've touched on this
because they had the majority.
Absolutely,
there was no one.
I want you to answer Mariah and Ohotle and Nduna.
So Mariah raised such a key point that for me it's a concern that the budget, I think it didn't do enough on government committing to cut. There was commitment to cut expenses, but I think it could have been more. And unfortunately, we don't have a mechanism to force them. We forced them through the ballot. What happened? And ANC lost the majority. After that, it's our representatives who negotiate for us, as has been happening. So sadly, if that is not strong enough, then we won't see a cabinet.
And we need to then have a conversation about a different system.
Correct.
That is going to insert our voices in the process a little more effectively. Yes. Right.
To cut those pegs. Then SARS, it is true, Braobs, that it's 7.5 billion, but we were talking two numbers. is 3.5 billion in the current year and 4 billion over the medium term. So the two add up to 7 points. I was
Right.
talking more of the 3.5, the
Right.
one the commissioner was asking
Immediate,
for now.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
But quite right. Thank you for that, Clive. It's 7.5 combined. And then I think the last point, perhaps, to close on that, is it just shows, because that's such a passionate call, right? Around immigration, unemployment, unemployed doctors, and those are the consequences of the choice we've talked about when the monies are limited and there's contestation.
Yes.
And hopefully what you have been able to do is to kind of help our listeners see
Yeah.
that you can take exactly that
Yeah.
and bring it into the house. So we hope the 2 sessions we had on that really helps our listeners as they grapple with their own budget, because it has not been a pro-consumer budget. It's going to be tough for us. Interest rates not coming down as much, and tax practices, interest rates, not really coming in our favor, sin taxes. So it's a tough. So use some of the principles that we've talked about, to sort out your household affairs. So
How do
do
people
your
get in touch
budget.
with you?
FrankMagwegwe.com. Work on your budget and discuss it as a household. It works better often that way.